Hello, and welcome to the Witch King of Samra's YouTube channel. I am the titular Witch King, and I'm here to review yet another tabletop role-playing game. Tonight's review is Lion and Dragon, a medieval authentic fantasy OSR role-playing game. Now, before I get started on my bullet points, I figured I should hammer out the details of exactly what that means. Medieval authentic. It is true to, at the very least, the 15th century of the Middle Ages, and it is true to British uh, mid, uh, 14th century law, religion, culture, etc. OSR, well, that's basically a catch-all term for old school revival, old school renaissance, and I am more and more becoming of the opinion that there is another OSR out there that is not connected to D&D, but I'll get on that some other time. Let's get started, shall we? Similarities and differences to D&D and other OSR games. Well, for one, depending upon the edition of D&D, it can be quite different. Number one, armor class goes from 10 up. Number two, there is saving throws, which is very common in the more recent of RPG Pundits games. Saving throws start at 16, and the higher your charisma score is, the higher your charisma bonus, which gives you better chances of rolling your saving check. Up to 3, less than 16, so 13, and it can go lower as you level up. Second of all, there are classes and no races, because in this setting, it is much more akin to let's say, Game of Thrones or Song of Ice and Fire than Lord of the Rings. In this game, you have classes and no races, as I mentioned, but the classes that exist are clerics, which are the holy defenders of the unconquered sun, or the campaign world's monotheistic faith. Now, this is something very important to note. Within Lion and Dragon, as in you would expect in most medieval authentic settings, there is one god. Now, if you're trying to hold to the medieval authentic way of play, there is but one god, because that is how the Middle Ages functioned. Now, you could look at, say, Harn, and say that's medieval authentic, but I agree with Pundit on this that it is not, because one of the most important medieval paradigms is that there is one God above all. But regardless, let me get back to the clerics. They are not part of the clergy, but the members of their own militant and religious order. So think kind of similar to the Templars. They are the fighting arm of the unconquered sun. They seek out heretics and banish them by flame or the divine blessings of the unconquered sun itself. They get access to clerical magic, which are essentially miracles. But I will get into that in a second. Further, they all have to be law aligned. The requirements are a wisdom of 9 or higher. They gain a d8 hit points modified by Constitution at level 1, and +1 each level thereafter, not modified. They have a combat bonus of +1, +2 versus magic saving throw bonuses. and they start with one random miraculous power. Fighters were the second class. They need a strength of 9 or higher. Their hit points are a d10 at level 1, +2 per level thereafter, and they get a combat bonus of +2. They gain mostly combat abilities, but as they level up, they get really badass. Third, you have Magisters. Magisters are the equivalent of wizards in Lion and Dragon, but to call them wizards in the D&D sense is a huge disservice to them, because the Magisters, at least in the core setting of Dark Albion: The Rose War, they are exclusively male-oriented. Now, some people may take this as sexist or misogynistic, but in reality, if you were a learned scholar in the Middle Ages, in particular the 15th century, you were male. And that's just fact. You can easily change it if you don't like it. It's no big deal. And I'm sure Pundit doesn't give a shit what you do with these games, just that you like them and talk about them and play them. He just wants people to have fun. Anyways, Magisters gain the languages skill or lore, so they gain the ability to speak different languages that would help with their academic or occult research and spellcasting. They also know how summoning works, and let me tell you, summoning demons in Lion and Dragon is not something you want to do lightly. You often in this game have clerics watching over you in your summoning circle so that you do not summon a demon, it possesses you, or it somehow wreaks havoc in the mortal world. Another thing to mention about Magisters, don't come into this thinking you can throw fireballs or shapeshift or do anything you typically see in D&D. This is a much more thoughtful and academic style of wizard. They roll randomly to gain skills which range from puffery, which is non-magical lab-based alchemy, astronomy, cartography and navigation, court politics and etiquette, being able to use herbs and ingredients from animals or even minerals in order to create common, non-magical cures or poisons. They could have a knowledge of history, both recent and ancient. They also can have knowledge of law, religious or secular, and they can gain both eventually. They may have knowledge of medicine, natural philosophy, occultism, and of course languages, which they gain at first level. Their magical skills are astrology, cures, banishing, battle magic, astrological talismans, and true alchemy. Now, something you might notice between Lion and Dragon and Invisible College is that the magic works almost exactly the same and is only adjusted to the modern occult paradigm versus the medieval occult paradigm. Although I would argue that the true alchemy and the great work that exists in Invisible College is nothing more than a fantastical version of the alchemy of the Middle Ages, and therefore, I would argue, does not make sense in the modern occult paradigm. Regardless, we are on to the last few classes. Number 4, thieves. Thieves, they're thieves. They can pick pockets, open locks, find and remove traps, sneak, listen, and climb. They gain a d4 hit points. Oh, and I forgot to mention, Magisters also get a D4 hit points at first level. They also gain skills as they level up, dictated by a random benefits table, which all classes have. Then you have the Kimri. These are basically the Irish travelers in a sense. They are the original people of Wales in this setting, and they are said, rightly though, to have cavorted with elves and fae in ages past, and therefore Kimri are a class and a people that are able to have knowledge of thieving skills, combat, and some ability with magic, but more particularly folk magic. Then you have the Scotsmen. These are the most powerful hit points wise of the classes. They gain a D12 modified by Constitution at first level, +2 per level thereafter. However, they're not as adept at combat as a fighter, so they only gain a +1 to combat bonuses. They also gain a +2 skill in wilderness lore, forest, and mountains, and they have a berserker attack. If you think of the wildlings north of the wall, that's basically the Scotsman. So those are the classes, and now we're getting into the clerical miracles and the magic of the magisters. First, you have the blessing. Blessings are, as you can imagine, they basically, the magister or the cleric calls on divine aid for the subject to triumph in some objective. And then you roll a prayer check, and if you succeed, the subject blessed will have a +4 bonus to a single d20 based die roll at a moment of their choosing. Then you have divine inspiration, which after one round of vocal prayer and a DC 13 prayer check, the cleric can grant holy confidence to one person, including themselves if they wish. Anyone affected must be within 100 feet of the cleric and able to hear them. This grants all affected a +1 bonus to attack rolls and saving throws for 1 round per cleric level. On a DC 18 check, the person affected will also be immune to supernatural fear for the duration. So basically, the monsters that you fight in Lion and Dragon, and likewise in Dark Albion the Rose War, most people never encounter them, and if they do, they shit their pants and die, or else go insane and live as gibbering maniacs, haunting the almshouses of the Unconquered Sun. You can also create a light, like natural sunlight, in a 60-foot radius around your holy symbol of the Unconquered Sun or respective god. You can also bless a weapon, or you can lay on hands to heal people. You can also call about divine sanctuary. You can further turn undead, and you can sense the presence of any supernatural chaos by gaining a divine vision. Lastly, clerics also get divine intervention, which is where they directly appeal to the divine for assistance in the form of divine intervention. It's very difficult. You need a DC 22 and even for it to work. And it must be for a cause that is significant. Lives of believers in danger, including the cleric's own, is always sufficient to fulfill that requirement. and it must be somehow directly further the cause of the faith. So basically, you gain a divine mission after, like, if you succeed in divine intervention, you must perform a divine mission which will come to the cleric in a dream or vision the night after he or she called on divine aid. Oh, and yes, clerics can be male or female. It doesn't matter to the clerical order, because if you were chosen by the Unconquered Sun, you work for them now. They can also lose their powers, as is typical with D&D. If you violate the oaths of obedience to the clerical order or commit some grave act against the faith, you immediately lose all your clerical abilities. It is possible to redeem yourself, but very hard to. Then you have the Magister magical techniques. Summoning, you need to find the true name of the demon you are going to summon, as well as the sigil, and that requires you going to one of the great collegiums, like Oxford or Cambridge in Albion. That's for Dark Albion. And then you need to gain that grimoire diary, find the demon's true name, draw the circle, and then you can perform the ritual, which will allow you to summon the demon. Demons are ranked from commoner to king, and as you summon a more powerful and influential demon, the difficulty class of the roll to summon is much harder, all the way up to DC 30. I won't go into too much detail about that, but I will tell you that if you don't follow the proper procedure, it can go bad really well. It also mentions blood sacrifice, but that is a highly chaotic act. And so don't do that if you're a lawful or neutral character, because then you will be chaotic. And chaos, although not necessarily evil, tends to have the most of the evil and vicious hordes of humanity and demons and elves, etc. They also gain the ability to, first of all of the demons gain or can give the Magister some particular power that they gain for the duration of the ritual. They range from making 5,000 coins of copper or silver to be gold coins, to causing a plague in a populated region, to making someone oblige you in accepting his or her proposal of marriage, causing someone to fall in lust with another individual, all kinds of really neat things that you wouldn't typically expect in a OSR game. Let's see. Sorry this is taking a while. The demons all have names, and it tells you what they are. Astrology is basically a divination method. Of course, and modern astrology is nothing like medieval astrology. You can honestly, I believe you can still get it, but if you go into Amazon and you look up the Picatrix or Picatrix or however you pronounce it, it is a medieval astrological grimoire, or guidebook or whatever. And if you want to learn about it, that's what I think would help. But yes, that is the medieval astrological grimoire. And then you can curse people, or I mean cure them rather. I'm sorry, I read that wrong. And I don't even have dyslexia. Dyscalculia I have though. But I don't anyways. So you can cure diseases, you can remove infection, you can cure madness, blindness, hunger. You can also banish magical forces and supernatural entities from an area, which is very useful and is very important in Invisible College, because, well, summoning demons and using magic in general in Invisible College is fraught with peril, and one of the safest ways to keep foul spirits from affecting you is to banish the area, which is also in the real occult books I have. Anyways, I keep talking about Invisible College, but the fact is, Invisible College and Lion and Dragon are very similar in a lot of ways, especially in rules. But anyways, let's get back to this. You have banishing and battle magic, which allows a magister to create a blasting wand. And the blasting wand is able to strike opponents with magical power. These are really powerful weapons, and I believe it's not just magisters who can use them. Oh no, strike that. Only magisters who perform the ritual to activate the wand can use it. You can also create the Bread of Gideon, which when consumed will cause misfortune on any who attack the individual who ate it. You can become invisible to opponents who wish you harm. You can break or make tight a seal, so you can break open doors, windows, locks on chests, manacles, or just draw them tight. You can make the earth tremble. It is one of the most powerful spells, a secret word of power, but it is also very dangerous. Basically, it allows you to cause the equivalent of an earthquake, and I don't have to tell you how dangerous that could be, even in a fantasy world. Then you can, I mean, this is something that chaos cultists do. They curse people with misfortune. Then you have astrological talismans, which are magical charms or talismans, which can be carried on one's person, worn as an amulet. They're tied to the power of those spirits called planetary intelligences. They are really badass and really expensive and difficult to make. They give you certain bonuses to attacks, skills, roleplay bonuses, all kinds of stuff. And I need to stop saying so much. Then you have true alchemy. True alchemy is the ability to do minor alchemy. So you can create a lantern that will be ever burning and never needs refilling. So that's called the Apollonius's lantern. You have banishing water, which can draw away incorporeal spirits of all kinds, as well as to protect against the undead, demons, extraplanar beings of any kind, magical constructs of any kind, or elves or other fey creatures. Then you have the draught draft of Courage, which it's a magic potion that makes the person who drink it basically become better in combat, but they suffer a penalty to armor class because they were so wild with Courage. Then you have Friendship Cakes, which will look to ordinary appearances as an ordinary sweet dry pastry. However, it will entrance a person who is meant to be the target of its magic. And so basically you feed some NPC in the world a friendship cake, and they will become friendly to you and desire friendship with you. So very useful in lots of ways. You can make curative potions. You can also make rain powder. There's major alchemy where you can make Byzantine dragon fire. Then you have the ability to make golems. So that's pretty neat. Then you have the ability to make homunculi. And you have the ability to make brazen heads or oracle heads that do all kinds of neat things. They're basically talking mechanical magical heads, but you can also make human ones, and that's not pleasant at all. Then you have the universal physic, and finally you have the great work, which is the exact same thing you saw in Invisible College. It basically is very expensive, takes a long time to make and collect all the resources for it. And when you either fail or succeed, if you failed, it has a detrimental side effect, ranging from brain damage to mutation. And when you roll the checks for the mixture of ingredients for your great work, you have the main effect that you roll a D100 plus your Magister's level, and basically it allows you to effectively de-age, or no longer die of old age. But the one you really want is the role of the true potion of immortality, which allows you to, which if you roll a 101 or higher, you cease aging, although you can still die from injury, poison, accident, or disease. And unlike other ones, you don't slow down aging or stop aging for a little bit and then start aging again. Instead, you can level up. You can keep doing everything you always do, but now you are ageless. You can also create a Philosopher's Stone. And if you know anything about the Philosopher's Stone and medieval folklore, or even just fantasy folklore, you would know it is very useful, and many alchemists in the Middle Ages wanted to create it. Silver to gold, very useful. Finally, we're coming down to currency, equipment, and coinage. The currency within Lion and Dragon is equivalent to D&D, but instead of having silver pieces, copper pieces, gold pieces, electrum pieces, all of the typical D&D coins, you have instead librum, shilling, pence, or pennies, and that's it. So there are 1 librum equals 20 shillings, 200 pennies is equal to 20 shillings is equal to 200 pennies, and 1 shilling is equal to 10 pennies. This is the medieval British monetary system, just so you know. Armor is pretty fucking expensive, and it's not going to be the kind of stuff you would expect in D&D, because these are the typical armors that you would see in this period. Padded jack, jack splint, brigandine, chain hauberk, hauberk and plate, full plate, plain shields, and elaborate shields. You have the typical medieval weapons, of course, but then you also have uncommon swords known as Sheffield swords that gain either a +1 bonus to hit or a +2 bonus to damage. And they are very beautiful weapons and very expensive. And then you have the Iberian Steel. They cost 16 librams to purchase almost anywhere. But in Iberia, where you can get them available at half that price, they give the sword a +1 bonus to hit and damage. However, they are not magical and will not be capable of harming creatures immune to magical weapons. Later periods of the campaign in Dark Albion, and therefore potentially your own game, could involve gunpowder and weapons like guns, flintlock rifles, stuff like that. Typical medieval equipment. Taxation is done by consent of Parliament. So it lists taxation, other expenses, schooling, cost of living, dowries. There are signature weapons that you can gain as you level up. And they give you certain bonuses. And each of the classes has their own particular signature weapon types. Now we come to one of my favorite parts, but ultimately not for everyone, which is the critical hit tables. When a monster or NPC, more likely, rolls a natural 20 on a combat check, they roll on the critical hit tables, and oh my god, these are dangerous. One of them, if you roll a 16, is a severe strike. It does an additional 2d6 damage to a muscle of the torso. The victim must make a saving throw to avoid collapsing in shock. The character from that point on can only carry half as many objects without penalty, and can only march for half as long in a day without suffering exhaustion. You could get a brutal strike to the groin, and that gives you a d6 damage, plus you lose 1 HP per round until receiving first aid, and any male who survives is left permanently impotent, which will have enormous negative social consequences if it is known. You could also, on a 19, have a strike to the spine, which makes the victim fall to the ground, cannot get up, and must make a saving throw to avoid passing out from shock. If they survive the battle, a second saving throw is required. Failure means the victim will never walk again, barring magical intervention. There's rules for parrying, firing weapons into melee or at a moving opponent, mounted combat and charges, grappling, etc., etc., etc. Then we have the experience chart. In order to play this game, it recommends, however, I disagree with this, that you start at 0 level, or level 0. And after you succeed and survive the first adventure, you become first level. I prefer to start at first level, honestly. But XP is not given out for in the typical D&D way. It's much more akin to the Dungeon Crawl Classics way of giving out XP. So in order to get to second level, you need 2 XP. 3rd, 5th, 4th, 10, 5th, 15, 6th, 20, and by the time you get to 12th level, potentially, you would need 55 XP, and at 13th and higher, you need an additional 10 XP. So yes, advancement in this game takes a long time, and that is good because it makes things much more dangerous, and it actually inevitably, despite a lot of modern D&D players' gripes about OSR games, the deadliness of combat actually forces you to roleplay because you don't want to get into combat. You'd rather just survive and get to high enough level. And the good thing about Line of Dragon and some of my favorite OSR games is you don't need to go into combat to get XP. And also, if you're math adverse or even have dyscalculia like myself, keeping track of XP in this game is too simple. Then you have treasure and magic items. One of my favorite magic items in this game is, in fact, Julius Caesar's weapon, Croceus Mors, or Crocea Mors, or something like that, which on a natural 20, it will automatically decapitate any person it comes across and you fight with. There's blasting wand or rods, caduceus wands, the cloak of the wolf, which allows you to shapeshift into a dire wolf, chaos bullets, different magical swords from Cortana, Dorendel, Joyeuse, Crusader shields, Kimri gloves, Crocea's Moors, Kimric short bows, elf tunics. There is so much in here that could fuel so many adventures and campaigns. And honestly, if I had the groups, I would definitely be running this game. Finally, almost finally, we come to monsters. Monsters are typically the animals that you would find in the wilderness, but if you head off the beaten path, you can find horrible monsters, elves, dragons, basilisks, black dogs, chaos slimes, hippogriffs, strix, unicorns, wyverns, Jotuns, all these things that I'm talking about, barring the natural animals, require magical weapons to actually kill and defeat. You cannot fight them with a regular weapon. You could not fight them with Julius Caesar's Yellow Death Sword, because if you were, the sword probably would break. So makes it even more adventurous and dangerous to even threaten your life against rat men or any kind of magical creature. Finally, we come to the law and justice, because the law and justice of the Middle Ages, and especially the late Middle Ages, which is what this game is based on, is very different from our own. In fact, there is a distinct separation between the ecclesiastical courts of religion and the God that you worship, and uh, the courts of the common people. Um, they include serious crimes, high crimes, misdemeanors. Oh, and in fact, one of the major issues that you may have in the game is that carrying melee weapons other than a dagger in public is a crime. Unless you're a cleric, a knight, or a noble, then you can carry swords in public. Carrying ranged weapons in public is another minor offense. Gambling in a public place, organizing a public disturbance, typical stuff the player characters would do in most games, is illegal. Bribes are a way to get around criminal offenses, and yeah, so this is the game. Let me show you the cover real quick so I can show you the game and how it functions, as I've already told you anyways. Um, it's a very fantastic cover. It's all the artwork in this game is based on the public domain artwork of historical medieval grimoires and artwork in general. So here's the screen, application window, here we go. So this is the cover. The book otherwise is in black and white, but yeah, that's the game. I give it honestly a 10 out of 10. This game is probably one of my favorite OSR games, and I highly recommend it to anyone who is curious about the OSR and doesn't mind buying a game from someone like RPG Pundit, who, although he is very outspoken and probably one of the most uh, outspoken individuals in gaming, hence his name RPG Pundit. Um, if you can get past that, if you can get past his conservative ideologue stuff, you can get into this game. Because Pundit, although he is conservative, he's still far more socially liberal than most conservatives in the US, for that matter. And I think a lot of what he does online is mostly just pissing people off to piss them off. But if that's not for you, I'm sorry, but uh, his games have no impediment to showing his behavior. I vehemently disagree with him on a lot of things, especially his Twitter bullshit. But this game is fantastic. Invisible College is fantastic. Arrows of Indra is fantastic. If you want typical or non-typical off the beaten path OSR games, RPG Pundit is one of my favorite designers for that stuff. Anyways, I give this game a 10 out of 10, and I hope you enjoyed the review, although rambling as it was. And if you like my video, it'll help me out. If you comment, so helpful. And if you subscribe, if you enjoy this or any of the other videos I've made, please do so. This is the Witch King of Samra, and I'm signing off.